all here for the class on how to get rich in real estate without really trying? Wrong class. This is on the AIR form versus the C.A.R. form. So I want to make sure that you have some information on that. We've got a short period of time here, but I'm going to cover the salient points of the two contracts. And if you do have any questions, go ahead and put it in the Q&A. I'll be happy to answer those questions. Let me go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Joel Carlson. Here's my contact information. If you say, Joel, I don't have any questions during this presentation, but I have questions later, call me, text me, email me. I want to hear those questions. Because we've had a lot of things going on in our industry as realtors. Most of them don't affect us as commercial realtors. Just saying. So I am a broker of MJC Realty. I have 3 offices, one in Newport Beach, one in Huntington Beach, and one in Seal Beach. I like the beach. I am also a C.A.R. instructor and teach the DREI, and I am a GRI. That means you took 14 days of your life to gain more knowledge, become a better professional. 2 of the 14 classes are dedicated specifically to commercial. I teach one of those. I am a master instructor with the California Association of Realtors. I don't know what that means. It just means I've been teaching for C.A.R. a long time. And a designated instructor from the National Association. That means I can teach the ethics course. We have to have, as realtors, we have to have ethics every 3 years from the National Association of Realtors. Now, in between that time, we don't have to have ethics, but every 3 years you have to have ethics. You have to have 2.5 hour worth of ethics. I've been teaching that class since the 90s. And as a certified real estate consultant, I basically gave myself permission to use buyer representation broker compensation agreements 30 years ago. You know, there's a big controversy right now as to how we're going to get paid. Nothing's changed. Let me just explain to you why. If we look at the situation as it stands right now, we have to do some history. The history says this. In 1620, the Mayflower landed Plymouth Rock and brought with it English common law. English common law says you cannot represent both buyer and seller. You must use a 2-party debt instrument called a mortgage, mortgagee, mortgagor. And their community property laws are a little bit different than what we have. In California, in the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo in 1848, we have to use Spanish law. Spanish law says you can represent both buyer and seller. We have a 3-party debt instrument called a deed of trust, trustee, trustor, beneficiary. And the community property laws are considerably different. So with that in mind, when I heard about this court case in March of this year, I went, what are they talking about? We've had agency disclosure since 1988. We have always put it on our commissions. Here's the amount of commission you're going to pay seller totally, and part of that is going to go to the buyer's agent. All right, so now we're just going to go back 10 years in California. We're going to jump on the Wayback Machine. Those of you who were growing up in the 60s, there was a Professor Peabody. He had a cartoon, and he would take his students back in time and teach them history. We're going to jump on the Wayback Machine. We're going to go back 10 years, just 10 years in the state of California. We get out of the Wayback Machine. We walk into an escrow company, 2014. Hi, escrow officer. Have you closed the transaction? Yes, we have. We have the buyer's closing statement and the seller's closing statement. On which one of the closing statements was the commission paid? Buyer's closing statement or seller's closing statement? It was paid off the seller's closing statement. Are you ready? You got your seatbelt on? Where did the seller get the money to pay us? From the buyer. Nothing's changed. The buyer got a loan, the buyer put the down payment, gave it to the seller paid us. So in the commercial aspect, a lot of times I'm paid by my buyer. As a matter of fact, that's one of the reasons I instituted in the 1990s the BRBC. It was called the Buyer Representation Agreement at that time, because I wanted to make sure if somebody looked at a piece of property, took my time, I got paid. So the Buyer Representation Broker Compensation Agreement is nothing new to MJC Realty. It's been required since the 1990s. However, it's new to a lot of real estate agents out there. And so I want to make sure that you understand nothing's changed. we're going through this tremendous time right now. And what's going to happen is it's going to level out and it's going to go back to the way it was. The sellers are going to figure out if they don't put a commission in there, number one, they're not going to sell the property. Number two, the comps will be all messed up. The third item, and the one that I see as the biggest, is the state of California is going to go, huh? The buyer's paying the commission, but if the seller's not going to pay it, if the money doesn't go to the seller pays, then the buyer's going to pull it out of their pocket. If they pull it out of their pocket, the value of the property is going to go down and Prop 13 is going to go down. We're already $55 billion in debt. They're not going to let that happen. They're going to let it ride for a while, and then they're going to pass some laws like they did with the BRBC, saying you can only have it for 90 days. That's the listing. It's a listing on a buyer, BRBC, buyer representation, broker compensation. And then if you list a house, you can only have it for 24 months. These are knee-jerk reactions from a court case that happened in Florida. So what I'm going to tell you is, what if the people are going to call their legislature, hey, I'm trying to buy a home here and you guys are making it impossible. So I just want to let you know, we're going to have some rocky times for a while. I always use buyer representation agreements. What we're talking about today is the difference between the AIR form and the C.A.R. form. Okay. Oh yeah, I gotta do this disclaimer here. Let me get up the disclaimer. Let me go here. Let me go. I've got a disclaimer that I have to read. Okay, so here's the disclaimer. Disclaimer says, oops. Oh, it did say something here. The following presentation is provided by the North San Diego County Association of Realtors members and other professionals for informational purposes only and is not legal advice or defined in the legal profession standards of care. The instructor's views are his own and not represent the association's position. For advice regarding specific questions, please contact appropriate professional, appropriate professional. So that would mean, well, I'm going to just tell you, let's get into this form here. I'm going to do, wait a minute, did I do that right? Yeah, I got the share up. All right, so we're going to go here. I want to talk to you about the difference between the commercial purchase agreement from the California Association of Realtors and the what we call OFA, Standard Offer Agreement and Escrow Instructions. We've got an hour here. I want to take questions, but I want to make sure that you understand there are significant differences between these two forms. As I said, I've been doing this real estate business over 40 years. And here's what I figured out. It's always going to change. Good, bad, or different, you're going to have change. The kicker is with commercial, as far as I'm concerned, we are the wild, wild west. A lot of times they make laws we don't have to adhere to because it's not 1 to 4 residential units. Now, if you're selling 1 to 4 residential units, fine. A lot of my agents, I have 3 offices. A lot of my agents are what we call resi-commercial. They do residential and commercial. I do strictly commercial, unless somebody comes. I had one of my clients the other day say, yeah, I bought a lot of real estate from you, Joel. I want you to sell my house. Okay, I know how to do that. And I teach the classes for C.A.R. Mainly, about 90% of the time, it's residential. But I personally like to do commercial. So there's significant differences between these two forms, and that's what I want to go over today. This particular form is 11 pages. This particular form, when we go to the California Association of Realtors, is 27 pages. You say, well, what? 27 pages? Yeah, we have what we call the bundle of forms. The first form that shows up is your agency disclosure. Now, this is required by law on the sale of all real property in the state of California. It is here, we just bury it in the offer. It's just down here a ways, okay? So in the offer, it's buried. Now, let's make sure we're clear on 99% of the time, you ain't writing one of these up. You're gonna do a letter of intent, an LOI. So the buyer sees the property, says, hey, I'm interested in this property. Here's what I'll pay for it. Okay, perfect. We put a little letter together and we say, Hi, we're interested in this property. Here's the buyers, here's the price, here's the terms, escrow, whatever else we want to put in there. Just a short one-page letter and say, what do you think? We send it to the agent for the other party, and we usually put a commission in there. Now, we can't say commissions based on the court case that happened in Missouri. And I told you, Missouri does business differently than we do. There, you could not represent both buyers. 39 states prior to 1980 could not represent both buyer and seller. As of 2000, well, as of 1995, I think, only 8 states cannot represent both buyer and seller. As a commercial broker, I don't work with an MLS. I work with information services, CREC, Bravitas or Bravitas, LoopNet, CoStar, For My Listing. Those are the places we go to find out about commercial types of properties. Those are exempt from this, decision that happened. Now, the seller has always paid the commission, but it comes out of the buyer's money. And the buyers understand that. They get a loan, they put a down payment, they give it to the seller, seller gives us the money. In a commercial deal, I never had any problem with that. Here's what I want you to know. There are 3 differences, 3 major differences between this form and the C.A.R. form. Now, when I talk about the bundle of rights, the bundle of forms, this is the first form. This is the agreement. The commercial purchase agreement is called the RPA. We go down here, the RPA. This is the broker section, and then we get into buyer's investigation advisory. Now, this is a commercial deal. When I deal with people who buy $20 million buildings, they don't say, oh, I need to do some research on this, or what do I need to do? They already know. They got to get their phase 1, phase 2 done. They got to get their inspections done. They got to make sure that the city is okay with them. This is a form that is put together by the California Association of Realtors, standard forms. They are 99% residential. So they say you're strongly advised to investigate condition and suitability of all aspects of the property. The first page and all of paragraph 9 and the AIR form talks about what we're going to do to protect ourselves. But they don't talk about that in this particular form. The next form, this is a bundle of forms. This has nothing to do with the the CPA, the commercial purchase agreement. This is the commercial purchase agreement up here. Okay, so it's commercial purchase agreement, joint escrow instructions. This is the California Association of Realtors, C.A.R. form. Okay, the next form is the possible representation more than one buyer and seller. Now, this is just a reiteration of the first form. It didn't have multiple buyers, didn't have multiple sellers, and it certainly didn't talk about dual agency very well. Remember, this was given to us in 1988. This is the disclosure regarding real estate agency. It was one of 2 forms given to us by the state legislature. This was given to us in 1988. If you were in residential property 1 to 4, they gave you a TDS, transfer disclosure form, which means I, as the agent, have to do a diligent visual inspection of the property. Okay, so this particular form we have had since 1988, and it tells you what the seller's duties are to the seller, duties are to the buyer, and if we represent both buyer and seller. It's incorporated in the OFA, in your offer for purchase, the AIR form, but nobody sees it because it's not a standalone form. This is page 1 of a 27-pager. And when we come down here to the possible representation of more than one buyer and seller, this is new. We haven't had this for more than a couple of years because this is a disclosure and a consent. And this applies to all real property sold in the state of California. Here it says right here, offers are not necessarily confidential. Buyers advise the listing agent or the seller may disclose the existence of the terms or conditions of the buyer's offer. Now, I've been taught all my life you can't do that. This is something recent. It's also in our code of ethics. If you're a member of the National Association of Realtors, it's in your code of ethics. You have to take every 3 years, 2.5 hours every 3 years, 3.5 hours, excuse me. No, 2.5 now. 2.5 hours of continuing education. You don't have to take a test or anything. You just have to listen to somebody jabber. So this is something that's new, but it's on standards practice 1-6 in our code of ethics. So all of a sudden, and I've never had trouble with this. The buyer presents the offer on a commercial building. I'm talking about a commercial building. So another offer comes in. They ask, hey, you got other offers? Yeah. What are they? Unless my seller tells me not to tell them, and I've never had a seller say, I don't want more money. They always say, yeah, let's bid this puppy up. It's the buyer who may say, and then we need a confidentiality agreement. Now, a lot of this stuff is residential. In commercial, the attitude is we are big boys and girls. We're buying $1 million pieces of property, 20, 30, 40, 50, $100 million piece of property. We're going to have a group do a due diligence. We're going to have all the disclosures that we need. We already have that kind of established because it's big money, and we don't know all of, when I buy a piece of commercial property, I don't know everything about it. I'm going to rely on my experts in the area. So, but residential has always been a little bit different. So we have a confidentiality agreement if you're working with the buyer. The next form, this is the bundle of forms. If you use the C.A.R. form, the CPA, all of these forms come with it. They're not in the AIR form. If you want some new forms, you can put them in, but they're not part of the purchase agreement. Fair housing. Now, this is a biggie, but it's an advisory. It's not required by law. The next one is the homeowners insurance. Again, this has nothing to do. This is a commercial form we're talking about. This has nothing to do with resident homeowners. We're not talking about home. What we're talking about is insurance. But what they do is 90% of their members at NAR, or excuse me, C.A.R. are residential. So they always include all this stuff. This is residential agent. Oh, by the way, you know who's putting this together? Let me make sure that you got this down. This particular form, who wrote up this commercial purchase agreement joint escrow instruction? Not who filled it in, I filled it in. Who wrote up this form? Who put the standard form together? Oh, you think attorneys? Wrong answer. At the California Association of Realtors, this form is put together by a committee. It is a committee of realtors, such as yourself. That's called standard forms. And they sit down and they put these forms together. I told you 90% are residential. So when it comes to a commercial form like this, they just add all this stuff to it that has nothing, absolutely nothing to do with residential. Excuse me, with commercial, it has to do with residential. Buyer's inspection advisory. Our buyers already do this. Disclosure and consent. If they ask what the offer is, I've always told them. And it's in our code of ethics now. It's from the National Association of Realtors. And now this is law. You can, by law, and everybody signs it. The seller signs it, the buyer signs it, the buyer's agent, everybody signs it. And we don't talk about this in AIR. AIR is the American Industrial Realtors, but they took that out and they don't say that anymore because they're not really realtors anymore. Then the next one is fair housing, again, residential. Home buyers insurance, residential. And then wire fraud. Now, wire fraud is a big deal. And I want to talk about this for a second. I was on the phone conversation with the head attorney at the National Association of Realtors. She was talking about a 2.4 million gone. She said two things. Number one, the buyer has to have a code with their escrow officer so that if they get a wire money, they call up their escrow officer and they say, hi, I just received an email from you. What's our code? If they don't know the code, it doesn't happen. The other thing is you need to use secure Wi-Fi. Where this court case happened, the guy was using free Wi-Fi. A hacker got into the computer, saw that the buyer was going to wire money, spoofed the email. that means copied it, put their own information in there for the wiring address, sent it to the buyer wired the money to the wrong address. So you need what's called a VPN. This is a VPN. Let me show it to you. I got to get a new share here. This is a VPN. This is a virtual private network. Anything, if I'm on the internet, anything that comes into my, if I'm on a Wi-Fi, wide area fidelity, wireless, not connected, anything that comes in goes through Charlottesville, North Carolina. The boys there say, "What y'all doing in Joel's computer? Get out." They do not let anybody into my computer unless I invite them. Let's go back here. So this is something I think is important. As professionals, number one, we need to tell our clients, establish a password. Number two, we need to have a safe way. If we connect up to the Wi-Fi, you go to Starbucks or any of those kind of places, and it's called a VPN. You say, "I've never heard of a VPN." I know, that's why I do these classes. I teach 2 of the classes on technology, one for the GRI. You need to be knowledgeable in this stuff. You need to keep up with this stuff, because if you don't, you're gone. It'll pass you up so fast and make your eyeballs spin. So VPN. The next form in this is the California Consumer Privacy Act. Now, this is basically 1 to 4, so they put it in here. However, it does transcend to all private information. So even though I'm using the AIR forms, I may include this. And there's nothing wrong with going back and forth and using different forms. This gives them the ability to opt out. Here's what I'm going to tell you about this particular form. This is the standard form. It's been put together by AIR, and the person who put this together at least massaged it to where it is today. I remember when, I don't know, 10, 20 years ago, I looked at this form and I went, man, these guys that put this together were still beating rocks together to make fire. Then David Mashian, Brian Mashian, got a hold of it. He's an attorney in LA, AIR member, and he does classes on this, full day classes, and gives you a big thick book to go through. And he's the one that's updated this to make it what I think is the strongest purchase agreement out there. All right, 2 things. Number 1, this form, AIR form, standard offer agreement, purchase of sale, is a seller form. This favors the sellers. I'm just telling you, this is written up that the seller has control here. I don't have a problem with that if I have the listing. This form, the real estate purchase agreement, commercial purchase agreement for C.A.R. is a buyer form. It protects the buyers. So 2 things happen. And very seldom will I use this form. I'll just tell you, the last 2 deals I did, I wrote it up on the AIR form. Actually, we gave them a letter of intent. They came back with their little comments. I wrote it up on the AIR form, and they sent it back to me. The attorneys had taken all the clauses that they wanted for their seller, put them in there. So what I did in my mind was I went to my buyer and I said, "Hey, buyer, these attorneys that are representing the seller, it is more, it's so far to over here for them, you can't even believe it. It's worse than the AIR form." I said, "We need to look through here and we need to take some clauses out of here and put it into there." Now, real estate in commercial is a whole lot different than residential. In residential, I'm sitting down with a buyer and seller. I would not ever ask, "Who's your real estate attorney? Who's your tax person?" They go, huh? In commercial, that's the first question I ask. "Who's your real estate attorney?" "It's such and such." Good, because they're going to get these contracts and they are going to look at them. I'm not going to interpret them. Nothing in my introduction said I'm an attorney. "And who's your CPA or tax person?" Why do you need that? Because they're going to make sure that what you're purchasing is valid. Not me. You want to buy this property. You have determined that it's a good deal for you. You've run it through your tax people, and I facilitate the sale of it. I am not an attorney. I'm not a tax person. If you don't have those, my company policy is you go get one. because I'm not going to take the liability on. I'm going to shift the risk to those people who are knowledgeable in the area in which they're dealing. The attorney's knowledgeable in the real estate law for contracts. The CPA or the tax person is knowledgeable in the tax ramifications of purchase and disposition of real property. So that's just my office policy. I'm not telling you what to do. I've got 3 caveats here. I read the one to you. Let me read it again here because I think it's important. This is a disclaimer. It says, the following presentation is provided by the North San Diego Association of Realtors members and other real estate professionals for informational purposes only, and is not legal advice or to define the real estate professional standards of care. The instructor's views are their own and do not represent the association's position. For advice on specific questions, contact the appropriate professional. So, my 3 caveats. Whenever I do a class, I want you to understand. Specifically, I'm dealing this particular class, commercial. Commercial to me is not residential. It doesn't have anything to do with housing or where people live. It has to do with office buildings, industrial, raw land, development, things like that. My second caveat is I will tell you what the laws are that govern those. And I'll give you the CITES form so you can look them up yourselves. But my third caveat is the most important, and that is it doesn't matter what I say. It matters what your broker says, because your broker is ultimately liable for whatever you do under 101.3.1 of the Business and Professions Code. So if I say I do certain things, that's nice. You talk to your broker, your manager, your team leader, and make sure that they are on board with it. I'm just telling you how I do business, having only been in the business a short period of time, since 1976. And as a company, real estate company, since 1982. And what I've learned there. So this particular form is a buyer form. This particular form is a seller form. It's just written to basically. So the last 2 deals I've done, we gave them the LOI, we wrote it up on this, sent it to them. We got back, they didn't even touch this. They took their own forms, put it into their own paragraphs and sent it back. That's why I asked for, what's your 2 items? Real estate attorney, not a divorce attorney, real estate attorney and CPA. We took that, we gave it to their attorney. Their attorney put the massages to it and said, hey, we're going to add some of these things in here that protect the buyer. This is a buyer form. Basically, it's for the California Association of Realtors. It's written to protect the buyers. The AIR form is to protect the sellers or promote the seller's position. Now, there's a couple of things. The C.A.R. form, if you've ever filled out the purchase agreement, whether it's the RPA, the RIPA, or the CPA, it's basically all the same. The first bunch of pages are where you can write things in. They call that the matrix. Now, I thought the matrix was a movie, but no, they say, I think if this is a table of contents, if I want to know where the installation of safety features that are required are, it's under 10B4. So that way I know where in the form to find this if I have a buyer that's interested. So this is a residential form that was put a commercial tag on it. And then they added some things. They sat down with some of the commercial brokers. I served on standard forms in the 1980s. When the purchase agreement went from 2 pages to 4 pages, I said, nobody's going to sign this dadgum thing. And they said, oh, we need your help. It was like hitting my head against the wall. It felt so good when I quit. Because every time we lose a major lawsuit, it's good for another paragraph in this thing. Remember, this is the California Association of Realtors. This is C.A.R. form. So if you know any of the other forms, the residential form, the residential income purchase agreement, they're basically the same, but they have a few things in here that are strictly commercial. This form is 100% commercial. Oops. Back here, this is 100% commercial. This says non-residential. And it tells you, you're going to close in 30 days. You say, close in 30 days? How are we going to close in 30 days? See, that's the kicker. You need to read the stuff you have your sellers and buyers sign. You need to read this stuff because what it says is nothing going to happen until everything's done in the paragraph 9. So it's paragraph 9. That's where all the contingencies are. So we come down here to paragraph 9. It says contingencies for closing. We're not going to start the escrow process until all of these are done, unless there's other agreements to it. This form is designed to say, hi, we got standard disclosures, we got physical inspection, we got hazardous substances, we've got soil inspection. You're not doing any of this kind of stuff with residential. We have 48 standard disclosures in the sale of a single family home owner occupied in the state of California. 48. None of them talk about soil. Okay. They do talk about government retrofit, conditions of title. There's one little thing on that, but that's a brand new thing. We've had this in here for years. As a real estate professional selling commercial properties, we've got to make sure that the conditions of title are taken care of. It's admissible. Let me see here, got a chat. I worked in for years. I have not been active. Do I buy tokens? Oh, okay, good questions. So this particular form, this is the AIR form. Where do you get this form? I get it from Zip Forms. They say, what? Okay, so I come down here. See, what I'm showing you is this is Zip Form Standard. This is a program that resides in my computer. When I'm out showing property to commercial, sometimes I cannot get an internet connection. My internet connection blew out today. Where I was, I had to come to the other office to get an internet connection. So if I can't get an internet connection, you can't get to these forms. So if we come here to the California Association of Realtors, so we'll go to CAR.org. Everybody knows where CAR.org is because there's somebody sitting on a house. Now, I'm not sure what the significance is of the person sitting on a house, but I know I'm at the California Association of Realtors. If you go to where you would normally go to your it's called Zip Forms. This is Lone Wolf. Lone Wolf is a real estate forms technology company. That's all they do. We have hired them to provide our forms. Now, they don't write up forms. All they do is they put the forms in a format that can be signed digitally, shown to our clients digitally. So what we're used to using is Zip Forms Plus. This is Zip Forms Plus. Yeah, we gotta have a username and password. Oh, I love this one. If you haven't paid your dues, you don't get into here. So we click on here and it says, oh, hi, you want to get into your items, the different deals you have going? Fine, just come and log into here. So what I'm talking about is this is Zip Forms Plus. See up here in the upper left-hand corner, it says Zip Forms Plus. This is web-based. If you cannot get internet connection, you cannot get here. I could not get here this morning. I had to come to my other office in order to get an internet connection. So, but with this is Zip Forms Standard. Up here in the upper left-hand corner, Zip Forms Standard. It doesn't matter where. I can be in East Uganda. I can this is a program that resides in my computer. And where I find it is I go up to here and I go to the different libraries. So I have the C.A.R. library, I have the AIR library, I have the San Francisco Association of Realtors library. I have all my libraries up here. You say, well, Joel, I don't use this. I know, but I'm going to tell you, if you cannot get an internet connection, you're out of business with this one. You go to this one, if you can't get it, you're done. This does not come up. So I believe we need a lifeboat, and the lifeboat is the one that's downloaded into your computer. So from here, if we go to our forms library, so we go back to our list, let me go ahead and put a new screen share together because it's, okay, good. So we go back to our list, we can go to the different tools that we have, my transactions. We can, if we just pick out one of the transactions, let's just pick out a transaction. I always like to see what documents I have in the transaction, and then I can go to all forms. Now, all forms is on the left-hand side on Zip Forms Standard. It's on the right-hand side. This is California e-publications. If you click your drop-down box here, you'll see we have publications for C.A.R. We'll have AIR forms. We have EPUBs. We have Orange County Realtors, Association of Realtors. And we have San Francisco. These are all libraries that you can use. So what I did is I paid $225 to C.A.R. C.A.R. then said to zip forms include the AIR forms here. So I can get into the American Industrial Realtors forms. These are all the AIR forms. I don't have tokens. I can use any of these forms as many times as I want for a flat fee. Okay, it's a deal. We put the C.A.R. put this deal together with AIR. So that's where I'm getting these forms from. If I go back here to zip forms standard, it's the same thing. I would go here. I would go to all the different forms. Here's my AIR forms. Here's my C.A.R. forms. Here's San Diego Association of Realtors forms, OCR, Orange County Realtors forms. I just pay one flat fee. I don't need tokens. And that in the old days, those tokens used to drive me crazy. Oh, I don't have any tokens. Can I buy some tokens from you? Because the office was closed. I couldn't get any. So now I love this. I can use this as many times as I want. You just have to have an AIR. You don't have to have a membership in AIR. This gives you the right to use their forms. You just have to know how to use the forms. So you pay for them. They're part of your zip forms. Lone Wolf runs it. All right. So this is a seller form. This is designed for the seller to sell property. The other thing about this form is it does not have all the bundle of forms with it. This is an 11-page form, and that's it. It has the deposit in here, and that deposit goes hard after a certain period of time. Now, if you look at California law says there is no such thing as a non-refundable deposit. But I told you, commercial people are a bunch of cowboys. You want to buy this property, you put up your money, and your money goes hard, which means it's transferred to the seller. You back out of the deal, you don't get dime one back. But the contract says. Now, if it goes to court, it may not hold up because we don't have any court cases on that. We don't have any law that deposits are non-refundable, and it even talks about that in our new residential purchase agreement. Then your purchase price, you're going to get something. You're going to get a loan. It's contingent on the loan. It's contingent on the total purchase price and the deposit. So it talks about the deposits here. We don't have any going hard deposits on the C.A.R. form. Okay, it's written for the buyer. This is written for the seller. You want to play with the big boys? You know, you put on your big boy pants and you come out here, and if you're serious about it, you put up the money, you buy the deal. If you're not serious about it, we take your deposit and we leave and go on our merry way. There's another area in here that talks about notwithstanding the foregoing. Within 5 days after escrow receives the monies as described in this particular situation, here, the escrow holder will release $100 of said money to the seller for an independent consideration executed upon this agreement and granting a contingency period to the buyer as provided. So our contingency period will be in paragraph 9. Now, when I first saw this, I said, $100, what are we doing here? So I talked to Brian Mashian, who's the attorney at AIR. He is also a real estate attorney. He's my go-to guy for real estate attorneyness. And he said, oh, that has to do with a court case that said the purchase agreement was not valid because it didn't give option money. Now, C.A.R. says you do not need option money. We have plenty of court cases that say, buyer, you want to buy, you give them a purchase agreement, you give them a deposit. It is a valid binding offer in the state of California. AIR says it might be a valid binding offer, but we want to make sure. So we give $100 worth of option money. That option money goes to the seller. And if the buyer backs out, they don't get their option money back. And they might not get their deposit back either, depending on what the contingency is. But now, if the buyer says, well, this is not really a purchase agreement, well, it is an option. So if I, the buyer, want to close it, I can close it. If I don't want to close it, I don't have to, but I lose my deposit. So this is just a little bit different. This is the second item that's a little bit different from our purchase agreements, the AIR and the C.A.R. forms. 5 talks about financing contingency. It is a contingency. Now, it says strike if not applicable. You don't see that on any C.A.R. forms. There ain't no strike if not applicable. If I say, oh, we're not to financing, we're buying this thing all cash, what I do is I go up here, I go to the strike, and I just strike it. So let's see, let's go down here to financing. And I just draw a line across it. You cannot do that with C.A.R. forms. They will not let the agents monkey with the forms. Those forms were put together by C.A.R. attorneys, and you cannot strike anything. There's no strikeout on C.A.R. forms. AIR forms, I told you, we're a bunch of cowboys. We'll strike things out. We'll put in our own terms. I'm going to warn you against that. You need an attorney if you're going to put in different verbiage into this contract. Because not an attorney from the buyer, not an attorney from the seller, your own attorney, because you're making changes to a contract. You better know what you're doing. And a lot of times what happens is we make these changes as agents. Their attorneys, the buyer's attorneys or the seller's attorneys, massage it to their benefit. So they get the idea of what the client wants and what we're trying to convey, and then they put it in legally binding verbiage. So we can strike things. Talks about, and then if there's 10-point boldface type, you probably should read it. You probably should read the whole dadgum form. This is only 11 pages compared to 27 pages on a purchase agreement for C.A.R. If the buyer shall fail to notify its broker, escrow holder in writing within so many days. Now I can take out my strike here so it doesn't strike this stuff. And do this. Within so many days, following the date of this agreement, that the new loan has not been obtained, it shall be conclusively assumed that the buyer has either obtained the new financing or is going to pay cash or waiving the loan. This is for the seller. Here's what the buyer's saying. Buyer, you're buying this property. If you're saying you're going to get a loan, perfect. If you don't tell us you're not going to get the loan in so many days, it is assumed you did. On the C.A.R. form, it says, did you get it? Did you get it? Did you get it? Oh, you didn't get it? Oh, okay, fine. We'll let you out of the deal. It's a contingency. There's no contingency here, Hot Rod. You say you got a loan, you didn't get it, you can't buy the property, you lose your deposit. Huh? So it's a little bit different on the AIR forms than it is on the C.A.R. And you can tell this is 2019. There haven't been a lot of updates in the commercial. Got a lot of updates in residential. And I teach them, I'm practically teaching every day the BRBC, buyer representation broker compensation, because a lot of people don't get the feel for that. They have been doing it. In commercial, we've been doing it for years. Hi, buyer, you're going to pay the commission if the seller won't. Oh, but ask the commission, but you, buyer, ask the seller to pay the commission. I'm not a party to the contract. Yeah, you're not a party to this contract. It's between buyer and seller. The listing agreement, you are a party with the house or the apartment. You are a party with the buyer. You're a party to the contract. The broker signs it and the buyer signs it. The seller signs it of the property and the broker signs it. So you are a party. In this, it is between buyer and seller. You're not a party to the contract. And that's California law. And so it talks about, don't get in the middle of this. Warning, California law does not allow deficiency judgments in seller financing. Where did this come from? Well, a lot of times, if in fact I want to sell the property commercially, I will loan the money. I'll be the bank as the seller. Well, if I'm the loan lender and you don't pay your payments and I foreclose and I lose money, I cannot come after you for deficiency judgment. You say, well, what does that have to do with anything? I'm telling you, it's a little bit different in commercial than it is in residential. So what you need to do is read this stuff, one. Two, when you come to something, you say, I don't know what this is talking about. You call the legal hotline, area code 213-739-8282, if it's a legal question. If it's just a forms question, Joel, I don't understand what they mean by this. Tell me what just text me, email me, call me, tell me what the area is that you're having trouble with. I will look at it. And if I don't know, I'll research it for you because I want to know this stuff. If I'm dealing with my clients on a consistent basis, I need to know this stuff. Sometimes I get questions, I go, I never thought about it. So I like your questions. And here's my contact information again. Feel free to call, text, email. I'm happy to talk to you, but I'm a baby boomer. A baby boomer, that means if you call me, text me, email me, I'll get back to you eventually. A couple of days probably. If you don't hear from me in 2 days, text me, email me, call me again. I'm not ghosting you. I learned a new word. I'm not ghosting you. I'm just busy. I have 3 offices. I am the president of the Realtor Investment Association of California. I have 3 nonprofits that I work with, and I try to have a little fun on the side. So it might take me some time to get back to you, but I will get back to you if you're persistent. Good. Let's go back here to our form. Now you say, well, what about the California form? If you have taken any classes and on those forms, the C.A.R. purchase agreements, the CPA, commercial purchase agreement, is very similar. There's about 5 paragraphs in there that talk specifically about estoppels, rent rolls, verification of rents, if there's any property management or paints or pest control or any of that kind of stuff. Now, there's a couple of new things in law, and one of them is if you're selling a piece of property that has a balcony, a wooden balcony, then you must have a certification on that. They had that party and the 200 people were sitting on the balcony and the balcony collapsed. No kidding. So now we have a law here in California. You have to have the balcony looked at, or any wooden structure. So it could be out, and not the balcony, but your outside walkways, things like that. Brokers, each party acknowledges the disclosure has been made. So here's our disclosure. And it talks about, we check box things here, 3-step process, disclose, elect, and confirm. The form that was given to us in 1988 talked about 1 to 4 residential units. We apply it here because we want to stay out of the line of sight of and not be a target from the state legislature in California. Let me see, brokers. Completely, there's no other brokers involved. So this is, there's no other brokers involved in this. I don't want another broker to pop up out of the woodwork and they say, oh yeah, you owe me a commission. How do I owe you a commission? Well, I made a deal with the seller, or I made a deal with the buyer, and if you bought or sold anything, that's a buyer representation agreement. If I'm going to have one of those signed, I want to know about it. That's a listing agreement. The only listing that I allow is an exclusive right to sell listing on a property, exclusive right to sell listing on a commercial building for a buyer. All right, then let me see. There's some other items here I want to cover. Oh yeah. So when we get down to 9 is where all the contingencies are. And it's A, B, C, D, E, F, all the way to N, or different contingencies. Once that contingency has been done, 30 days after the following of the title commitment, then we're going to do a survey. We don't do a survey. That's done by the title company on residential. We have existing leases we have to approve. Owners association, if there's one. They say, is that a homeowners association? No, it's not a homeowners. It's, I buy a condominium commercial and I have to pay I have to pay owner's fees, take care of the roof, and all. It's just a condominium that's commercial. Other agreements, there might be other agreements, pest control, financing, it's in paragraph 9, existing notes. Now this means if not stricken, the following legible copies of existing notes and deeds of trust. They're not talking about notes on a piano. We're talking about loans against the property. You have a deed of trust. That's the evidence of the debt. This is the debt. It's called the note. So many days after, you're going to look at the note. Destruction of the property, what's going to happen? Any material changes to the property, what's going to happen? Seller's performance, brokerage fee. Now we're getting it. Payment of the closing of such broker's fees specified in written instructions, escrow holder executed by the seller and the brokerage, called the brokerage fee, is agreed to the parties that the broker or the third party. And insofar as they're concerned, that no charge shall be made in respect to the payments without written consent of the brokers. In other words, if you guys sign this, buyer, seller, and we put a commission in here, we're going to put a commission in this agreement. You can't renege on it. You can't say, oh, well, we're not going to pay Joel. Yes, you are, because this is your escrow instructions as well as your purchase agreement. It's admissible in a court of law. Then we get down to documents required before closing, a lot of documentation in the commercial deal. In a purchase exchange of property, advisable to obtain title insurance. So we got a title insurance disclosure here. Now, I'm going to be going to 11 o'clock. If I'm supposed to go longer than that, let me know. Attorney's fees. Prevailing party will pay attorney's fees. Prevailing party, without limitation, who substantially defeats. Attorney's fees shall not be computed in accordance with any court fee schedule. Notices, all notices, you can't do with handshakes. No handshakes here. Everything has to be in writing. Liquidated damages. This says high. It would be impractical. Now, when you read the one at C.A.R., it talks about to extremely difficult prior to the signing of the agreement to actually have damages. So, therefore, after satisfactory waiver of all contingencies, entitled to liquidated damages in the amount of. Okay, so whatever the amount you put in here, there is nothing under law that it basically says if we put $50,000 in there and I back out with I've got no contingencies. I've released all of 9. All my contingencies are gone and I back out. As the buyer, you keep my deposit, whatever we put in here. It's $50,000, if it's $150,000, if it's $2 million, whatever it is, the seller gets to keep it. And there's arbitration of disputes. Now, remember, we got an initial here in order for this to kick in. This just says we're not going to go to court. This is liquidated damages. This says we're not going to go to court if you initial this. If you don't initial either of these, we're going to court because that's how we're going to settle it. Now, it always can go to court if there's a discrepancy or a discussion about things. Sometimes it's like, wait a minute, we arbitrated and the arbitration is wrong. I want to go to court. Nothing stops them from going to court, even if they've arbitrated. Just the courts may just look at the arbitration and say, that's it. Here's a little difference. Waiver of jury trial, parties hereby, big bold-faced, jury trial. Why? Because we've seen some jury trial decisions. The one that happened in Missouri, and Missouri does business a little bit different. That was the NAR settlement. 4 hours, done. None of the jurors owned a home. How do you make a decision about commissions if you've never participated in them? That's the little things that make me crazier than I already am. If we're doing a 1031 exchange, tax deferred, disclosures regarding the nature of agency. Now, this is a form, a separate form that we hand out. It's the first thing. It's under 2079 of the Civil Code. AIR just includes it. It just says, hey, this is what the state legislature gave us in 1988. We don't have a separate form. We just include it if you represent the seller exclusively, the buyer exclusively, or both buyer and seller. And they just put the verbiage in there the way the Department of the legislator in Sacramento legislatures wanted you to do it. Any construction that's any to be done, and then additional provisions. Additional provisions would be things like the buyer is licensed. You got to make these disclosures just like you do on any other real estate transaction, state of California. If you have a license, now it doesn't say California real estate license. It says if you have a real estate license, you must disclose that. So if you're licensed in Missouri, you got to disclose that. It says no representation, recommendations made as to the legal effect or efficacy of these forms. If you want to know if it's any good, you seek legal counsel. And that's why when the buyers and sellers read this, they go, well, crud, I'm going to bring my own attorneys in and make sure that this is okay. Most of the time, what happens is the attorneys will strike a few things and add a few things. They don't give you whole new purchase agreements. Last two I've done, they opted for all new. You could just tell. They just took paragraphs out of it, changed some of the words around and pushed it in there. It was a total seller contract, which is this contract. Everybody signs, the broker signs, the buyer signs, the seller signs, and they agree to a percentage of commission. It's in the purchase agreement. It is not in your purchase agreement on the C.A.R. form. If we go to C.A.R., there's nothing in here about your commissions. There's nothing in here about your commissions. Seller signs it. If there's a commission involved, it would be above here. There's nothing in here about your commissions. In the AIR form, hey, we're not a party to the contract, but we're big boys and girls, and we want to make sure we're going to get paid. So we put our commission in here. Now, the only problem is, well, that's not a problem. If it's a buyer representation agreement, this is below the buyer's signature. The buyer signs the contract up here. Anything below their signature, the buyer's not obligated to. This is a seller. This is above, this is consideration. You're going to pay the purchase price. This is the seller. And there's nothing in the agreement that happened in Missouri that said, we can't do this. We just can't put it in the MLS. We don't deal with MLSs. I belong to the AOC, Realtors Association, RCAOC, Realtors Alliance of Commercial Brokers. It's realtors. We're commercial. That's all we do. We do not have an MLS. You don't have to join an MLS. Did you know that that's a court case in 1970s called the Marin County Association of Realtors? They decided you do not have to be, you can be a member of the California Association of Realtors, the National Association of Realtors. You do not have to be a member of the MLS. Or you can be a member of the MLS and not be a member of the NAR-CAR, your local association. So we do that. All right, let me see. We got something in the chat here. All right, worked with, okay. For your clients wishes to keep the option of the jury trial opens, do you suggest striking it? Nope, talk to an attorney. That's an attorney question. Okay. I don't mess with the forms. I don't strike anything. I've learned because I've been a C.A.R. instructor for too long. My brain is beaten about don't touch the form. I say to the buyer, I think this form might have a little problem here. Do you want to change it? Yes, I do. Give it to your attorney. That's why I don't deal with them on a commercial deal. And when I'm talking commercial, I'm talking about 5 units or more if it's a residential, and offices, industrial, something C or M zoning. They have an attorney involved. They don't have an attorney, I don't talk to them. Or I refer them to an attorney. Okay. I got several attorneys I've worked with in the past that are good commercial attorneys, and I make sure that they're comfortable with that. So in this particular case, that's something I will not do. If you want to do that, fine, get your broker's permission before doing it. All right. If we don't join NAR, we can't get the forms. Okay, then you're going to have tokens. So if you're not a member of the National Association of Realtors, by the way, C.A.R. is who provides zip forms. So NAR, you don't need to be a member of NAR. You need to be a member of C.A.R. But to be a member of C.A.R., you have to be a member of NAR. That's one of those, huh? So to be a member of NAR C.A.R., then you get it. If you're not, then you join AIR. Do we have enough acronyms? In the AIR, they call them now themselves AIR CRE, commercial real estate. So AIR, commercial real estate, you have to pay for tokens. You have to join them. It's about the same cost as it is for NAR and CAR, and get your tokens from them. You can belong to any MLS in California. I'm not talking other states. I'm not sure about that. In California, we have a court case that says you can be a member of an MLS and not a member of a board of realtors, association of realtors. We still have some boards of realtors here. All right, so tokens. And I can give you the number for AIR is right here. So just give them a call, tell them Joel sent you. Or you can go to AIR.CRE and say, hi, I'm not a NAR or CAR member, but I want access to the forms, the AIR forms. They'll say, fine, join AIR, pay the fees, we'll sell you tokens. I eventually believe that what they're going to do is they're going to get tired of this token stuff. And they're going to say, you pay this amount of money and you get as many tokens as you want. Just like when you go on the cruise ships now, you pay this amount of money, you can drink all you want, up to like 10 drinks a day or something like that. So I think that's the way they're going to go, just to stop the rhetoric going on. All right, any questions, comments, reactions on this? Good. So if you're dealing with the AIR form, I want you to get a copy of it. I want you to look it over and become familiar with it. You're going to have to read it several times. This is not something you read once and go, oh yeah, I got, unless you have an eidetic memory. It's taken me years to become comfortable with this form enough to teach it. And only then, when I talked to Brian Mashian, who is the attorney with AIR, who puts these classes together, very good classes. Let me see if there's, okay, we got attorney's fees, no mediation. Yeah, there's no mediation in the AIR forms. It's litigation or arbitration. You can do strike-throughs. There's defaulting parties. And you basically, they can strike, they can add things to this. It's whatever the buyer and seller agree to. But after they've agreed to it, we give it to their attorneys and they put their magic widget blessing on it. And then the tax people look it over and say, yes, this is okay for your tax situation, or here's the tax ramifications of it. Not me, I'm not getting into that. Do you allow commercial to use a C, or do you require? Doesn't matter. Whatever you want to use. If you have enough education under my brokerage to use CAR forms or AIR forms, whatever you want to use, you know who's going to dictate what you use? The buyer and seller. Okay, that's been my experience. I always use CAR forms, and then they'd say, what are you, a rookie? I said, no, I know those the best. They say, you should be AIR. So I started using AIR forms. And it was like putting on my cowboy hat and my boots and my spurs. Well, we could do anything we wanted. We could strike stuff out, add things. In the old days, we would take the purchase agreements written by hand, and we would be like a circular letter. We'd write on the sides of the form. Okay, all the different clauses we wanted. We make up our own clauses. And every once in a while, it went to an attorney. Nowadays, I don't touch it unless it goes to an attorney. Any other questions, comments, reactions? Okay, again, if you want to get in touch with me, feel free. I'm happy to talk to you. This is something I wanted to do. Real estate's been very good to me, so I'm giving back now. And so Shirley asked me if I would do this along with a couple of your members, and I said I'd be happy to and answer any questions you have. And I told you I love your questions because it makes me a better instructor and it makes me a better broker when I'm working with these deals. Shirley, any last words, or do we have anybody who is with the association that put this together?
Nope, everything is great. Thank you so much, Joel. We really appreciate it. Great presentation.
Thank you very much. Let's do it again. When you have questions, comments, I love talking to folk. In the words of a famous real estate attorney, go out there and sell something. I need the money. See you in the next class.